A reminder of Unfound's accounts at TikTok, Instagram, the X, and Unfound's website, theunfoundpodcast.com. David A. Kallenberger was a 47-year-old from Lafayette, Indiana. He was a father and a lover of motorcycles. On March 15th, 2016, while riding his Harley to Florida, David's bike broke down outside Franklin, Indiana. Later that day, the bike was on the side of the road, but David was not. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. Do all of you know that Billy Joel song, A Matter of Trust? Although I'm not a big fan of the Piano Man or his genre of music, I find that tune coming into my head often when I sit on my couch and contemplate what's true and what's not true in the narratives of the disappearance's unfound features. Can I trust this information to be true? How much confidence do I have in it? And all this thinking is how I've come up with many of the guides I use to get to the truths of these cases. For example, with Rodney Kaiser, was that really blood on the walls of that building or not? With Justin Gaines, did he get picked up by a blonde in a black car or not? With Amanda Fravel, did she really get to her boyfriend's house or not? Seriously, pick any of the 340 disappearances on this podcast, and you'll find something to question. Well, with the disappearance of David Kallenberger, we have possible suspects, witnesses, and even the missing man himself who may need to be doubted. Thus comes the age-old question, to believe or not to believe. And now a summary of the case. David Kallenberger was given up for adoption as a very young child and did not see his bio family in person until just 2 months before his disappearance. But in those 4 decades, David was married a couple of times. He had 3 children. David worked construction. He developed a passion for Harley Davidsons and had the broken bones to show for it. Because of this, David most likely developed an addiction to pain medication, although it did not seem to affect his daily life. Yet, the biggest issue in 2016 was David's marriage, which had fallen apart due to his wife's own drug problems. So, on March 15th, 2016, David had decided he had had enough. He was going to Florida to live with his sister. David left Lafayette in the morning and reached Franklin when something went wrong with his bike, with him skidding off the highway. A state trooper and tow truck driver came along to help David move the bike back to the berm. Yet, David refused further assistance and insisted a friend was coming to get him. David had called his sister to facilitate this. Later that day, though, David was still there with his bike. And eventually, the Harley was there, but David wasn't. He was never seen again. Investigators discovered several people who saw and encountered David that day, but none could explain what happened to him. We know that men going missing during the courses of relationship breakdowns is very, very rare. Yet, here we are 2 weeks in a row where wives could be the best suspects. Contemplate what kinds of women would be capable of such things as you also contemplate these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1. Was David really truly suicidal like he said in a voicemail, or was it just hyperbole? Number 2. Was David really poisoned by his wife the night before he chose to leave? And number 3, how are we to explain a witness whose story has seemingly changed from then till now? David's family is very convinced foul play caused his disappearance. The guest for this episode is David's sister, Kim. Unfound News. The newest episode of Unfound now has been released on the YouTube channel. I do my best to analyze the disappearance of Taylor Casey, who went missing in the Bahamas on June 19th. Next, for all of you Patreon and YouTube supporters who get extra content, please find the newest episode of Found, where I look at the disappearance to discovery of Whitey Bulger. Finally, August 1st, 2024 marked my 54th birthday. Yes, really. Oh, I still look like I'm 39? You're so kind. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the sister of David Kallenberger, Kim. Kim, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
It's interesting. The listeners should know that I'm up here. We're doing this interview on July 26th of 2024. Kim is a resident of Florida, and coincidentally, I am not in Florida for this interview. I'm up here seeing my dad in Pennsylvania. So, hello to you, fellow Florida citizen Kim. Hello to you. How is it down there today?
It's nice and warm.
Okay, very good. Well, it is July. Okay, let's start here. Let's talk. Of course, David is your brother, but I think you have a unique situation here where you didn't know him or were not connected to him for a while. So maybe you want to talk about that, and maybe talk about if you have other siblings. Let's just talk about the family first.
Okay. Well, I'm the oldest of my mom's 6 children, and David was the baby. And David was adopted out to my mom's best friend when he was 9 months old.
Wow.
My mom found herself in a situation where she was a single mom with 6 kids and couldn't take care of us all.
Yeah.
So she ended up placing David and my sister Luann and brother Keith all up for adoption. Now, Keith and Luann were adopted together by people that we didn't know. Their adoption was handled through the state. Mm-hmm. And then David, like I said, was adopted by my mom's best friend. Wow. We were in contact with her until David was about 3 or 4. And then we moved to Idaho, and they ended up, her husband passed away, and they ended up going to Texas for a while, and we kind of lost contact. So I have a sister, Chris, a brother, Tim, who's passed, another, like I said, David, Keith, and Luann. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, so wow. I had searched for David, and at one time we did find him, but he wasn't ready to really delve into a relationship with us at that point. And so I just waited, until I could find him again, because right. I personally didn't have an address or a phone number or anything for him. My sister Chris did, but like I said, he wasn't ready to open that can of worms yet. So, so in 2016, actually in 2015, okay. August of 2015, I reached out to his wife. I found him on Facebook and reached out to his wife, Valerie. Mm-hmm. Before I reached out to him to kind of get a feel for whether it was time to for us to meet or what the deal was.
Okay.
So after about 2 months, I think it was October, I finally got to speak to David, and she was very controlling of the whole situation. And so she just kind of, kept me hanging for a while. But then I finally did get to talk to him, and we made plans to meet in January of 2016.
Okay.
So I flew to Indiana, and I stayed at my sister Chris's. She lives in Salisbury, Indiana, which is down around Bloomington, Greene County. And David lived in Lafayette. He and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you a backstory on all that in a minute.
Yeah.
But so I flew up to Indiana. I think it was around the 15th of January. And I got to spend 3 days with him and his wife at my sister's house. And before I left, well, I need to back up again.
Okay.
David and Valerie had a daughter together. Her name was Bailey. And she was taken from them due to Valerie's drug abuse.
Okay.
They ended up, he did everything he could to get her back, but his wife Valerie would not get off the drugs, and she tested positive for drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Every drug test that was ordered by the court, she failed. And so they ended up placing Bailey for adoption. She was 11 years old at the time. And my brother was just devastated.
Yeah.
I reached out to the state, but it was too late. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't get her because I was going to try to see if I could keep her. And that way at least she would be in the family, because I know what it's like,
Right.
to lose
Right.
a sibling, or, my mother went through a lot, giving up her kids, and that's a very difficult situation. So anyway, fast forward to January, we had talked about quite a bit about them moving down to Florida to start a new life. And, my brother wanted to get his wife away from that influence up there. It's really bad,
Mm-hmm.
really bad. And so...
if I could jump in here, Kim, I'm really surprised. He's, of course, when he went missing, he was in his late 40s. And you went all those years, like all those adult years, never having any contact with him. Of course, I'm not here to judge. I'm just a little surprised, being that, of course, most of the listeners know that I was given up for adoption, and I ended up meeting my biological family in my mid-20s. Not meeting him until his late 40s seems unique. Do you any insight why it took that long, or what, being that you were both adults all that time?
I just didn't know where he was or how to find him.
Okay.
And one day I'm sitting on my computer, I'm on Facebook, and I'm just sitting there thinking about him, and I'm like, I'm just going to check and see if he maybe has a Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it was just that simple to find him. And I don't know why I thought of it all of a sudden, but I did. And it wasn't like he wasn't in my mind. I knew who David was. Being the oldest, I was about 6.5 years old when all this took place.
Yeah.
The adoptions and everything. So I remembered.
Yeah.
I remembered Keith and Luann, and we did find them in, I want to say it was 91. We found
so a lot
them.
earlier.
And that was also when David was found. But like I said, he just wasn't interested at the time.
Okay.
But, through his adult life, he had a lot of scarring emotionally and everything, and he was just ready. He was ready to know us. And it was really a good reunion. He and I just, we immediately clicked. it was like we picked up and we'd never been apart, and we wanted to make up for all those years that we weren't together. And
Right.
I was I wanted him and his wife to move down here. I wanted to help them, first of all, and I wanted to be close to my brother. I wanted him in my life, and he wanted to be in my life. So that was the plan. When I left there in January, that was the plan. Was they were gonna save up some money and figure out what they were going to do with their stuff. They were going to sell a bunch of their stuff and just bring what they needed to Florida with them. And in the meantime, I was looking for a place for them to live. And,
Okay.
that was where it was. That's what the situation was then.
That's where you left things in January of that year.
Right.
Okay.
And my brother said to me the only thing that he hated about moving away from Indiana was leaving his mom, his adopted mother.
Yeah.
He adored her. I mean, literally, he just adored her. And we'll get into some stuff about her and David's wife, but
Okay.
there was a reason why she wasn't living with them anymore.
Okay. All right. So we just wanted to set that up for everybody that he's your brother, but you did not grow up with him. In fact, you had like 4 decades where you two were separated.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Just to make sure everybody understands that. So, and what we're also saying here is when you finally did get to meet him in person, it was only then a few months later that he went missing.
Correct.
Wow.
It was only 2 months.
Okay. Very good.
Almost to the day.
Yes. Let's move on to this. So tell us a little bit about David, his person, what you did gather from meeting him in person in January, and then those 2 months. What can you say about his his personality? When you met him, did he remind you of your other siblings or of your parents? Did he have those, those things that we find out that are like genetic or environmental? What can you say about that?
I didn't really, all we did was just basically enjoy each other. We didn't really, I didn't have enough time in 3 days to get into all of that, to figure that out.
Yeah.
Just knew that we were happy to be together finally, and we had made plans to to have each other in our lives for the future,
Right.
We knew we'd missed all those years together, and he said he finally felt like he belonged.
Huh.
Because like I said, he didn't feel like he belonged with his adoptive family. Now his mother was a different story. His mother was just singing to him, but I don't know really, honestly, if we had any real interest in common. He liked motorcycles. I know that.
Yeah.
He had a motorcycle that he loved riding. He worked in the union in construction.
Okay. Okay. And you said how many days? 3 days spent with him? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got 3 days with them.
Okay. All right. Let's move. All right. So let's move on then to this. Of course, before, of course, Valerie. Did you learn anything? Did he have any prior relationships, prior marriages, prior to Valerie?
Yes. Yes, he was married to a woman. I'm trying to think of her name. I don't remember if he was married to. He has a daughter and a son.
Mm-hmm.
His son is the oldest. His name's Eric, and I think he was married to his mother, and I believe her name is Ashley. And then he has a daughter with a woman named Kim, and his daughter's name was Ashley.
Huh.
So that was
wow. That is unique. Huh. Okay.
And then him and Valerie obviously had Bailey, and
okay.
so they met. Mother had gone to visit a cousin prison, and Valerie was her bunkmate.
Oh my.
His cousin's bunkmate, and she introduced them. And from the time that they met, I mean, they were writing, she had them write letters to each other, and then he got on her visitation list. And so he would go see her every week.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes he would take Eric and Ashley with him to visit her. And I think Ashley was right around 10 or 11 years old when David met Valerie.
Okay. What year would this approximately? What year would this have been?
I want to say that it was like 2006.
Oh, okay. So 10
Maybe
years. So they were together 10 years before he went missing.
Yes.
Wow.
Actually, I think they were together a little bit longer than that. Now that I think about it, I want to say they were married for 10 years. Their daughter was 11 when I found him. So I'm pretty sure that they were married for at least 10 years, and they were together for like 3 or 4 before that. So it was probably around 15 years.
Okay.
They were together.
All right, so we have to just, so if everybody out there is listening, yes, when David first met Valerie, she was in jail.
Yes.
Why was she in jail?
For perjury.
Wow.
Some case she got sent to prison for perjury.
Okay.
So I'm not real sure exactly what what all was involved in it, but that's what I've been told, and I actually gleaned that information recently because what Valerie had told me was that she had killed her sister's boyfriend because he murdered her sister. So, this lady was a little out there.
Okay. All right, and we're certainly going to get into that a little later, certainly. But, all right, so they meet. When he goes, the bunkmate is Valerie. David and Valerie meet. There's an attraction there, and he actually waits until she gets out of jail, and they get married.
Right.
Wow. Okay. Right. And they have a daughter named Bailey.
They had been together ever since.
Okay. Very good. So, do you have any idea, once again, maybe you didn't talk about this with David before he went missing, but do you know how long he waited for her to get out of jail so they could be together?
It was a couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think you told me that before. 2 years he waited. That must have been...
Almost like that show on TV, there's that show about love after lockup.
Yes.
Yeah. Kind of like that.
Oh my goodness. All right. Yeah. So that was how they met. She gets out, they get married, they have a daughter Bailey who eventually gets given up, I guess because of issues with Valerie.
And she was actually taken.
She was taken. Them. Okay, taken from them. Okay.
By the state.
Okay. And then finally there in January of the year that he went missing, 2016, almost to the day, 2 months before he went missing, you finally got to meet him and you got to meet her. And have you ever gotten to meet Bailey?
No. I have spoken to her online through Facebook, but that's it. And she believed everything that her mother said.
Yeah, well, all right. We don't want to get into that now. I just want to know you've had some contact with Bailey, and we'll get back into that later.
One time.
Okay, one time, and we'll talk about that later. All right. So you have had one.
I did have contact. I've never met Eric. I've spoken to him through Facebook a few times, and I've tried to make plans to meet with him, but it hasn't worked out so far. Now, I did have David's daughter Ashley here with me for about 9 or 10 months.
Wow!
After he went missing, she was pregnant at the time, and after she had her baby. In December of that year, she came and stayed with us until I think it was September, October the following year.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
For her to come down, you have so you have a much better relationship with her than you have with Bailey, for example, which we'll get into later.
Well, I have an on again, off again relationship with Ashley
Okay.
because she's got a lot of issues herself.
Oh, okay.
You know.
All right, we're not here to get into that. That's not part of the
Right.
disappearance. All right. All right, so I have to ask, once you saw David, very specific question, how often were you communicating with him? After you went up there to Indiana and saw him for those 3 days, 2 months before he went missing, after that, how often were you communicating with him?
I would say I spoke to him maybe 3 or 4 times before the day that he disappeared.
Okay. And the reason it was not more than that is because you've told me that he told you that his wife was hiding his phone.
Correct.
Okay. All right. We're going to certainly come back to that in a little bit. All right. So having contact 3 or 4 times over 2 months, so every few weeks, maybe you would have liked more than that, but there maybe was this phone issue. Let's move on to some what we might call issues. Let's start here just for David. I realize that you only got to know him for a couple months and everything, but as best as you can tell regarding alcohol and drugs and things like that, pain, opioid addictions, anything like that. Did David have any of that going on in his life at the time of his disappearance?
David did drink.
Okay.
And he did he had pain medication. David had been in several motorcycle accidents, and at one point he was bedridden for a year. They thought that he was going to lose his leg.
Wow.
And so he had a lot of pain. But, he was a responsible person, and he had to work, so he was on pain medication.
Right.
But as far as any other drugs, no.
Okay. All right.
He hated it, and he hated his wife doing it.
Right. Now, your allegation is that she was into things.
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. But just regarding David himself, was a drinker and had to take pain medication. Of course, any motorcycle person that I've known who's been riding for many, many years has been in a couple accidents. Luckily, they've survived. But we know some of those accidents can be pretty bad, and it sounds like that's what happened to David.
Right. Correct.
Okay. And we know how certain pain medications can become addictive. We're not saying David was addicted, but we know the power of all this medication.
Right, and I do believe that what he was on was an opioid of some kind.
Yeah. Right. Okay, let's move on to this. Regarding, of course, we've already a little touched upon it. Let's get into it a little deeper. We have to remember the situation of this disappearance is that he was leaving Indiana to go to Florida to move because his marriage had broken down. What do you know about his marriage going south? What did he tell you? What were the reasons for it?
Well, he was tired. He told me that he was tired of her stealing from him.
Okay.
She would steal his money. She would steal his pain medication, and she would take his pain medication and sell it to buy meth and heroin.
Okay.
And that's what he told me.
Okay.
This was what was going on. That's why they were fighting all the time.
Okay.
He was fed up with it. And, he said, I've been trying to save money to move down there and make a new start. Every time I turn around, she's stealing my money. She's stealing my pills.
Mm-hmm.
She drinks half of the bottle of alcohol in an afternoon, and he was just fed up with it. He says, I don't want to live this way anymore.
Okay.
And so.
And now we can talk about that phone now. That one of the other things was she's taking his phone, so seemingly he can't call people, can't talk to people.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. And regarding when he told you about, you have these 3 or 4 times of communication, and he told you about this, where did the phones ever come back? Was she stealing them to check and see if he had another woman in his life? What feeling or what did he tell you about the phone situation?
I don't know. He didn't even understand why she would hide his phone, except that she wanted control over everything he did.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
She was a very controlling person. So, I mean, literally, he could not go to the bathroom by himself when he was at my sister's. He couldn't go take a bath without her going in the bathroom with him.
How do you know that?
I was there. I saw it.
You saw it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They were staying there with me and my sister at her house.
Okay. So I guess what I'm asking regarding the phone was this a situation where it would disappear for, let's just say, for a day, and then it would appear like on the table, or was this a situation where every time it went missing, it never came back, and he had to go get a new phone? Which situation?
No, it would show up after a few days. It would just show up on a shelf or on the floor by the bed, and it's not under the bed. It's like just laying there on the floor, like he just walked right over it, didn't even see it. Yeah, no, that he wasn't like that.
Okay.
You know, but that's what she tried to convince him, that he was just paranoid.
Okay.
She was constantly telling everybody that he was paranoid.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in a couple minutes. Regarding some of this paranoia that maybe wasn't paranoia. We'll leave the listeners to decide for themselves. So we have this phone issue, and in fact, you just said before that when you were up there, you actually went with him for him to get a new phone while you were in Indiana for those 3 days, right?
Right.
You did. Okay. And so we're talking versus
now, when we went to Walmart, he told me about all of this. You know, that he thought that she was trying to get someone to kill him. That he knew he was being followed. He said. And so I told him, I said, well, let's get you a phone. I said, I'll get you the phone. And just don't let her know you've got it. And that way, if you need it, you can use it, to call me. And, but he decided against it. So we didn't get the phone.
Okay.
But like I said, that's when he first told me that, he thought that she had somebody watching him, that she had a plot to kill him.
All right. Once again, we'll get into that in a moment. If that's not a new topic here on Unfound, so anytime that comes up, we have to talk about it. But I want to make sure we're very specific about it. But I just have one more question regarding their marriage. Did he ever mention to you or anybody else that he had consulted a divorce lawyer, anything like that, before he went missing?
No.
Okay.
No, he didn't ever tell me that he was considering talking to an attorney. Not yet. I mean, at the point that I was there, they were moving down together. He wanted to get her away from the people that she was getting her drugs from up there.
Okay. Because once again, I remind everybody, the situation of this disappearance is that David was on his bike driving from Indiana to go live with you in Florida, and that's when he went missing. So that sounds like I've never been. Everybody knows. Maybe you don't know, Kim, but the listeners know I've never been married. I'm certainly not a marriage expert by any means, but that sounds like the path to divorce, and that's why I have to ask.
Right. Yeah. Well, that had just what happened that morning that he left, and the night before is what prompted him to leave without her.
Okay, and we're certainly going to get into that. So we have the situation that this is what's going on with his marriage. Doesn't sound like a pleasant situation at all. Maybe many people out there can relate, and of course, I think most of the time people do get divorced if this is what's going on in their marriage, or if maybe it's just a living together situation. People start moving out. I don't think this is everybody's kind of heard these kind of stories before, although rarely does it are they connected to a disappearance. Let's move on to this. You talked about the P word, paranoia. Why don't you tell the listeners what David was telling you about how he thought people were following him, and some examples? Why don't you go into that?
Well, he said that he noticed, even when he was working, that people were watching him. And it really kind of freaked him out. He's like, I don't know what's going on with her, but, she's up to something. And He told me, he told his mother, he told the neighbor, Rick Scripter, that if anything happened to him, that it was her. I mean, that's how he put it. Anything happens to me, Valerie did it. He was that sure that she was having him followed, and that she was going to try to have him murdered.
That's what he told you.
That's what he told me. And at first I was like, are you sure about this? I was thinking to myself, is he right? Could this really, this is something that you just don't hear every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of, it wasn't that I didn't take it seriously, but I don't think I took it as seriously as I should have.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I don't think anybody blames you regarding that, Kim. You hear that, and sometimes you're not sure what to think, especially if you're coming from a different situation in your life where you've never thought about that at all. And you hear that for the first time, it's like, well, that sounds a little weird. Of course, then David goes missing, and then if you think back and you think, well, maybe he was telling the truth and everything. So I need to ask you some questions about that. And by the way, Kim, I don't know if you're messing around with things like papers or something while you're talking. Remember, the microphone can pick up everything. So if you're moving around or something, please watch that. Did he ever use any names? And I don't want you to say those names, but did he ever say, I think she has John Smith following me or Jane Doe keeping tabs on me? Did he ever use any names, or maybe differently, did he ever say, well, I'm at work and a red car keeps passing by, or a black truck or anything? Did he ever give you specific examples?
A white van that was always around him. He said, everywhere I go, I'm seeing this white van. Mm-hmm. And he said it was like a chomo van, a child molester van.
Okay.
No windows, solid sides. It was like a cargo van.
Okay. And he believed this was happening. And did he ever tell you how long he thought this had been going on for? A month, 6 months, a year? Any? Did he ever give you a time frame?
He did tell me that it had been going on about 6 months.
Okay. Did he ever talk to, you said he talked to his mother about this. What about his coworkers? Of course, this disappearance is over 8 years old now. Any coworkers ever come forward to say, yeah, I suspected something, or any friends of David who you trust, of course?
I didn't know. I did not meet anybody that he worked with.
Mm-hmm.
But his talking to his adopted family, and his friend Rick Scripter, he was telling me how David had told him all this stuff, and apparently he had also told a lady down he was telling a lot of different people, that he thought he was being followed, and he would point them out to them, and like at the dollar store and stuff, somebody he knew that worked there, he had told them about it. The thing is he didn't trust the people that he was closest to tell them anything, except for his mother.
Okay.
After talking, they claim that he didn't. Like the guys that his wife was getting her drugs from, those were friends of his from childhood. Mm-hmm. But they all say no, he never said anything about anything like that.
Okay. What did his mother when he would say this to her? What was her response? Do you know?
Well, she believed him, mm-hmm. and she told me that she believed that Valerie was responsible. She died 6 months to the day that he went missing.
After.
Yes.
Okay.
And she had told me that she thought Valerie had tried to poison her. That's why she moved out. She thought she was poisoning her food. And Valerie was horrible to her, she said. She was so hateful to her. So she ended up going and living with her niece. And that's where she was when she passed.
Okay.
She was living with her niece.
All right. So we have a white van. We have David claiming that he's being followed. We'll get into the poisoning and stuff a little bit later. But before his disappearance, this is what he was telling people.
Correct.
Okay. Let's move on to this. Just talk a little bit about this guy. His name is Bill, and he's the motorcycle repair guy who we're going to talk about a little bit later. But how did Bill and David know each other? Was like Bill a friend of Valerie's first, or was he a friend of David's first? What can you say about Bill? And then later we'll get into how he plays into all of this.
Well, from what I understand, Bill was a concrete guy. But he also worked on motorcycles in his spare time.
Okay.
So anytime David had a problem with his bike, that's who he would take it to. And they called him Biker Bill.
Okay, Biker Bill, that works.
They had been friends for quite a few years.
Okay.
In fact, Valerie and Biker Bill's wife were, like best friends.
Oh, okay. So Bill, through his wife, does have a connection to Valerie.
Yes.
Okay. Had you ever heard of Bill before? Of course, I know you'd only gotten to know David for a couple months, but did you ever heard of Bill before David went missing?
Only in a phone call. Only when he asked me to call him for him.
All right. That was on the day of his disappearance. That was the first time you ever heard of Bill.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So everybody remember Bill will be coming back to this, the motorcycle repair and everything in just actually a few minutes. Now, I just want to make sure everybody understands what you believe David's plan was on, that day. We'll get into what happened the night before, but you believe his plan was to leave Indiana and move to Florida to live with you. Was this going to be permanent, or was this like a vacation? What is your understanding?
No, it was going to be permanent. He was moving here. He wasn't going back. He was going to come down on his bike. He wanted to get his bike down here.
Okay.
And I was going to drive back up there and take him back up, and we were going to get his stuff and bring it down here. We were going to,
Okay.
He was going to temporarily stay with us, but we were going to find him a place, and then he was going to go back and get his stuff. He had a van. He didn't care about the car, but he had quite a bit of stuff there. And I'll get into it later, but she started selling stuff immediately as soon as he disappeared.
Yeah. All right, so really this first trip was just a way for him to get his motorcycle to your place, to Florida, and then
to get away from there.
To get away from there, and then at some point you and he would go back to Indiana and get the rest of his stuff and maybe a vehicle that he owned or something.
Right.
Okay. How long had this plan been in? How long had this? Please.
That day when he called me, he literally said to me, "If I don't get out of here today, I won't make it out of here."
Okay. How long, the way you remember it, how long had this plan been in the works? Did he just call you up like one day and say this is going to happen, or was this like a week?
He called me that morning and told me that he needed to get out of there because Valerie had poisoned him, and he knew that somebody's still following him,
okay.
And he knew that it was going down. He was going to either get out or he was going to be dead.
Okay.
And he asked me, "Can I come there?" He said, if I can't come there, then I'll go to Texas. That's where my brother Tim lived, was Texas. And I said, "No, of course you can come here." And so I sent him, my address and directions how to get here. And he started on his way.
Okay. Did you have, at that point, in your mind an idea? Now, Of course, I'm in here in Pennsylvania. I know what it's like to drive back and forth between Pennsylvania and Florida. I understand from Indiana, it's a little longer of a trip, but still, it's 20 hours or something like that. Did you? But I usually just do it in a day myself. It's very rare.
Right.
Did you have any idea of a time frame when David would be getting to where you lived?
Well, I figured he would probably stop since he was on a motorcycle, that he wasn't going to drive straight through.
Okay.
Plus, I knew he had to, he had to get up and get off that bike because of his leg. Through the day, his leg would swell, just from being up, and even if it's dangling, or if it's just, I have swelling in my feet from neuropathy and stuff, so I know about the swelling.
Yeah.
If your feet are down, it's going to swell if there's an issue.
Right.
And his leg would always swell, and that's why he had to take the pain medication. So I was sure that it was going to take him, maybe 2 days to get here.
Okay. All right. So he was not going to do what we might call the midnight run like I've done so many times.
Right.
Where like Lee, of course, he left in the morning, but I once again, as a person who's driven back and forth between Pennsylvania and Florida many times since 2018, that sometimes I'll do the midnight run. I'll leave at 7 in the morning and drive right through the night, although that's kind of rare now. This is not what was going on here, but it was good. You thought in a couple days.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, I made it from my house to my sister's house in about 14 hours.
Okay.
But that's just getting in and going.
Yes. Right.
Just hitting it hard and staying at it. I can leave here about 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I can be there by 5 or 6 that night.
Okay.
That same night. So, but I was sure he wasn't going to drive
like that
straight through. And I told him, I said, when you stop, give me a call, let me know where you're at, all that.
Okay.
So.
To your knowledge, did David tell Valerie what he was doing?
I don't know if he did or not. I do know that he ran into her. There was a guy named Alex Waters that David was friends with.
Mm-hmm.
And he had gone out there because Alex owed him some money. So he went out there to get his money that morning before he left. And Valerie showed up there. I do know that they were arguing because Brian, who we'll talk about later, was there with her, and he said that they were arguing with each other.
Okay, so
David got on the bike and left.
All right, so there is a possibility that Valerie knew that David was leaving Indiana, leaving her behind to go to Florida.
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
There was a big possibility.
Big possibility. Okay, very good. All right, so it wasn't like necessarily like she got up that morning and he was gone. They did actually see each other on the morning of his disappearance.
Right. Now she wasn't home the night before.
Okay.
She had left, and that's when he said that she had poisoned him.
All right. And we're once again, everybody's hearing the poison. We're going to get to that story. I just need to make sure we understand a lot of these other things. But listeners, I can guarantee you, we're going to talk about the poisoning. I know it's been mentioned a few times, just all in good time. All right, so this is not a situation, as this happens sometimes, where people are planning to leave their significant other and the person just packs up everything and leaves and ends up at their mother's later that day. This was not that. Valerie and David had encountered each other that morning, like 8, 9, 10, 11 in the morning that he left.
I think it was around 10 o'clock.
Okay. Very good. Now, going back to Bill just for a moment, there is the story that David's bike was getting is going to play a big role here in a bit. That Bill had to work on David's bike that day before, maybe just a couple days before, maybe the day before. Do you know what this repair was? Did David tell you about this? To this day, do we know? Please.
His clutch. He had work done on his clutch.
Okay.
And that was what him and Valerie had gotten into it about the morning of the day before he left.
Okay.
Was he wanted her to take him to go pick up his bike, and she didn't want to do it.
Okay.
And they got into a big argument about it. She said, she told me after he disappeared,
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to get the bike because I knew how much it meant to him.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have it for his kids, and she's like, I'm not getting that bike. I hate that bike. I've always hated that bike. He loved that bike more than he loved me. So, that caused a big fight between the two of them.
I'm guessing there's a lot of wives out there that feel like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Okay. So we just have to remember, because eventually, of course, this bike is going to be found on the side of the road, and David said that we'll eventually get that something was wrong with the bike. But it's important to note that this guy Bill, who had known David, Biker Bill, had known David for a long time, and he was the guy who had worked on the bike just the day before.
Yes.
Okay. So let's now move up to the day of the disappearance. And like the listeners, once again, listeners, there's a lot of things we're going to have to backtrack a little bit later, but this will all make sense in the end. Trust me. Let's move up to the day, and I'd like you to please explain of course, you were not there. You were in Florida, and we're going to get to how you missed the second call. But for now, please explain up until what you understand about David's, after he leaves Lafayette, after he has an argument with Valerie, after he gets his bike from Bill and he gets on the road. Explain what you've learned up until the point that he calls you the first time. What do you know? Can you describe that timeline, what you found out about that particular period of time?
Well, what I found, what happened was he left. And he got on I-65 going south. That's how you get down here from there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just south of Indianapolis, between Franklin and Edinburgh, and his bike broke down.
Okay. And it didn't just break down, but it caused him to kind of go off the road. It's not like it sputtered and he drifted. He kind of went off into like the grass or something.
Well, he did slide off the bike did slide off the embankment.
Wow. Okay.
So there was a tow truck driver there that saw it.
Okay.
And so he pulled off the side of the road. He also called a state trooper, and I do not know the trooper's name, but I do know the name of the tow truck driver. But anyway, he pulled off and they helped David get his bike back up on the road.
Okay.
And I do know that they did offer to help him get the bike down to Edinburgh. Mm-hmm. There was a Harley Davidson shop down there, so they wanted to help. They said they could, help him get down there. And he was like, "No, I'm just, I'm just going to go home. I'm going to have to call somebody to either come get me or call, get a tow truck." He was upset because it was $300 for the tow truck driver to drive him back to Lafayette.
Right. Because everybody's going to look at it, and I am going to do a map video for a YouTube channel regarding this, but he was, let's just say, about an hour and a half into his ride. It's about an hour and a half?
Right.
About an hour and a half. All right, so this is not just like right down the street on the highway from where he lived. This is like an hour and a half away, which it would, be very inconvenient, and maybe, of course, that charge might make sense.
Plus, it was raining, and it was cold, and he was miserable, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. He went to a couple of the neighbors where his bike broke down.
Is this all before he called you the first time, or what?
I believe it was. I believe after the tow truck driver left.
Okay.
And the police officer left, the trooper.
Okay.
I believe that's when he walked down and he asked to use Dave. What was his name? Dean Sloan's telephone.
Okay.
And then the neighbor next door, he went and used his phone sometime during the day as well. His name is Bill. There's like 4 Bills in this story.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly he hung out around Dean Sloan's house. But he did cross the highway, go over to a pig farm, and sit down. They found his rain suit there, his wetsuit, whatever you call it, and a couple of CO2 cartridges. He had a pellet gun.
Mm-hmm. Just want to make sure this is all you're understanding. This is all before he called you the first time. We're going to get into
correct.
2 calls eventually.
No, the first call was that morning, but
when I mean the first call where after he broke down.
Yes, because I did not get a call from him until around 1 o'clock.
Okay. So I guess what you're saying is after the bike broke down off the road, the tow truck driver and the state trooper come by and help him. He did a lot of walking around before he called you for the first time. After he broke down.
I don't know if he went to the pig farm before or after.
Oh, you're not sure? We're not sure about that. Okay.
But I'm pretty sure about the fact that he went straight down to Dean Sloan's house to ask for help.
Right.
I know he tried to get the guy Bill he offered to pay him to take his bike because he had a pickup truck, but the guy had already had a drink and did not want to drive.
Okay.
So he said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do it."
Okay.
All right. All the things that you think about in hindsight, just
right.
And going over it just brings all that back up, But
let me ask you this then. So he finally does call you, and I guess what we're also saying is that he's going to this house to use the phone, but he has his own cell phone, and he did that first call. When I say first call after the accident, he did use his cell phone to call you, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's now talk about that first call. You actually spoke to him. He's out there on the highway. What is the conversation?
I'm broke down. I don't know what's going on. I just got my bike out of the shop. I don't understand. I need you to get a hold of this guy, Bill. And he said, I need you to tell him what mile marker I'm at and ask him to come and get me. He said, my battery's about to die on my phone.
Okay.
So can you please call him and tell him where I'm at and tell him to come get me?
Okay. So once again, instead of David paying the $300 to the tow truck driver and whoever else, he wanted his buddy Bill, who had just worked on the bike the day before, to come down and get him, and maybe Bill has a trailer and they can or a pickup truck to put the bike on that.
Right.
Okay. And so in retrospect, how did David sound? Did he sound clear-minded? Did he sound worried? Did he sound frustrated? Was he ticked off? How would you portray his tone?
He was aggravated. He was frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't, he just wanted to be on the road and get out of there.
Yeah.
He kept repeating to me, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to die.
Okay.
If I don't get out of here today, I won't make it out of here. So he knew what was up. He knew that there was a target on his back.
Okay.
And, and so I told him, okay, I'll call him. And I did. I called him like 3 or 4 times. I left several messages telling him exactly where David was and to please go down and get him. Okay. And that, his phone was getting ready to die, and so he couldn't call him, but he asked me to.
Yeah.
So.
Gotcha. When you could not reach Bill 3 or 4 times, did you try to call David back and tell him, Bill's not picking up, or not?
I did not, because I didn't want to run his phone down.
Okay.
He said he didn't know where his charger was, and he had no way to charge it, and so he wanted to, that's why he wanted me to call.
Okay.
So.
And to your knowledge, when he went to this guy Sloan's house, and maybe I should explain that, where the bike ended up being was on it was on an interstate, but there are houses like right there. In fact, many houses like in the area.
Right down the embankment.
Right down there.
There's a whole neighborhood.
Right.
A small neighborhood sitting there.
Right.
On both sides of the highway.
Right. So, are we then to understand then that when he went to use this Sloan guy's phone, that he did not try to call Bill himself?
I don't know who he called.
Okay. All right. So this is the first phone call. You do what you can. Of course, you're in Florida. He's stuck there on the side of the road on the highway. And so now let's move on. The rest of your day. Explain, we're going to get back to what went on, at least as far best as we can tell regarding David after this. But you do your best. What do you do just your life for the rest of that day? Because you ended up missing this other call that maybe the second call that maybe is even more important for this disappearance.
Right.
But why, what did you do the rest of the day, and why did you miss that second call? And we'll get into the contents of it here in a bit, but what did you do the rest of the day?
Well, the rest of the day, I was getting things ready. I was, the next day, I was leaving to go down to Miami, to pick up my grandkids, because I was flying, the very next day to Virginia with my grandchildren, who were like 4 and 5 years old at the time. I was taking them up for their visit with their dad. And so I was going to be up there for, it was either a week or 2 weeks. I came home on the 28th. So I'm going to say, like, I don't know, 10 days.
Okay.
I was going to be gone. And so, I had called Bill. I figured, that Bill had gone and picked him up, and he would call me when he got back on the road or when he got here, because I just didn't know what he was going to do, but I figured I'd hear from him when he was either on his way or once he got here, But what happened was I had an old, it wasn't an iPhone, it was a different kind of phone.
Android anyway, or phone? Android
yeah,
phone?
it was an Android, but I could take the battery out and the SIM card. Well, I had a problem with this phone. Every once in a while, I would have to take the battery out and reseat it in the phone.
I had phones like that, sure.
And then I could get my messages, and that's exactly what happened. Was when I got back, because let me back up. When I found out that David was missing, that was the Friday before I left. I left on Sunday and flew back to Florida with my grandkids, and then I drove home that night. I had stopped to get gas, and when I did, I checked my messages, and there were none, and that was extremely unusual. I hadn't had any messages the whole time, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? So I took the battery out, and I put it back in, and when I did, I got the message from David.
All right, and once again, just to make sure everybody understands, when did you do that?
That was Sunday evening, the 27th.
So that was 2 weeks later.
Almost, yes.
Wow. Okay. So that's and so we have to understand. So what we're saying is David is on the road on March 15th of 2016, and you don't get this second message until 12 days later.
Right.
All right. So someone and Kim, I know exactly what you're talking about. It doesn't happen to any of the phones I've had recently, but I did have phones back around that time, 2015, 2016, that would kind of lock up, and you'd have to take the battery and put it back in. Of course, Android phones, for the most part these days, you can't take the batteries out of them. They're hardwired. They're hardwired in there. If the battery goes bad, you just get a new phone. There is no buying new batteries anymore.
Right.
All right. So everybody understands on that. So really, in those 12 days, then, there were no red flags for you, no red flags for anybody else who knew David?
I didn't, first of all, I hadn't gone on Facebook at all because I was there with my family enjoying, my visit with my son and his new wife and his kids, so I wasn't I wasn't really too concerned. I figured, it wasn't unusual for me to go a week or two without hearing from David.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing what the situation was at the time that I last spoke to him, I assumed that Bill had gone down and gotten him.
Yeah.
And he had his bike and was working on it. And when David was able to come back down, then he would give me a call.
Okay.
But on Friday, I saw a post from Valerie on Facebook.
Yeah.
I just happened to go to my Facebook and look to see what was going on, and I saw a post from her saying, hey, if anybody knows where David is, I haven't seen him since the 15th. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Huh.
Because I was sure that she wasn't just not going to go home. If he was there, she'd have run into him.
Right.
So I'm like, what do you mean you haven't heard from him since the 15th?
Mm-hmm.
And she says, well, I haven't heard anything. He left, and I don't know what happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you need to file a missing persons report. That was the first thing I said to her, and she never did.
Did she not say something in that post about she thought that he went fishing?
She said that he'd gone camping.
Camping. Okay.
Yeah. It was winter time. He was not camping in Indiana in the winter.
Well, we're not going to get into we can't get into speculation. Anyway. We just want to stick to what she wrote. And she said that he went camping.
Right. And that she hasn't heard from him.
Okay. In 12 days.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, so when you saw that post, and then it was after that you discovered you missed this message?
Yes.
Okay.
I saw that post on Friday.
Okay.
And I got the message on Sunday.
All right,
Sunday evening.
So 2 days later. All right.
Right.
All right. So, and as you stated before, she's trying to figure out what happened, where David is, but she never does file a missing persons report.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So on one hand, she's curious where he is. On the other hand, she doesn't do anything paperwork-wise. And on top of that, she says that he went camping when obviously that was not his intention. He was not going to Florida to go camping.
Right.
Okay. All right.
She was acting like he was going camping up there.
Yeah, I got you. I think certainly. But everybody will leave it up to their imagination why she put that when certainly it doesn't seem that he was going camping. He didn't have anything with him to think he was going to go camping, whether in Florida, in Indiana, or anywhere in between. Okay.
Correct.
So once you hear this, and she has this post about camping, and you talk to her and everything, let's talk about now that second message. And I know you have a copy of it. I've had a chance to hear it. I know that it's been played on some other interviews that you've done. But in a capsule, what does it say? The second message.
He said, I'm still broke down out here. I don't know what's going on, but sure as crap, she's setting me up. And I don't know what to do. I guess I'll just kill myself. That's what he said.
He said that. He said kill himself.
Yeah. He said, I thought I was going to get to come to Florida and we were going to get to spend time together. But, I don't know what to do. I guess I'll just kill myself.
And then right at the end...
I don't honestly know why he would say that.
All right, well, frustrated.
But he was upset because he really honestly believed that he was being followed and that this was a setup. He even said to me, this is a setup, biggest crap.
I've heard it. I've heard the message. Hopefully, unfortunately, the quality of the message that I heard on maybe some of these other plays you've done, the quality is not that great. And, and maybe if there was a transcript of it, if you've ever typed out what he says, that might be helpful. And, and I'd like to post that because like I said, I've heard the recording and, You can pick out some words, but not all the words. And I realize it's
Right.
like a copy of a copy of a copy, and I know that the quality gets worse time after time. So, but most importantly, though, also at the end, he says something about somebody pulling up.
Yeah. He said, "Oh my God, there's a truck pulling up. Oh my God, Kim, I'll call you back." And that was it.
That was the end of the message. Do
Yep.
you have an idea of when that call was made to you? Once again, this is the day where he'd already called you once about you calling Bill. This is the second message. Do you know what time of day it was when he called you and left that message? Any ideas?
It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I found out later that the truck that he was referring to, or I assumed that the truck that he was referring to, was a Good Samaritan who had pulled over to try to help him.
Okay, and we're going to come back to that certainly. All right. So, once again, when you hear the message, it sounds like something that's really, when somebody says, "Oh my God, a truck's pulling up," that sounds ominous.
Right.
But you ended up finding later that it was actually somebody who was trying to help David.
Correct. There was a couple from Kentucky.
Yeah.
And apparently the police had interviewed them. They had called when they saw the story on the news, and so they were interviewed.
Okay, and I want to get more into that. I want to get into that a little more detail a little later. But just to remind everybody, he called you the first time. Approximately what time was that?
About 10:30.
All right, and so 5.5 hours later, approximately, he calls you again and leaves that message.
Correct.
Okay. So let's get to the police. You said that Valerie did not file a report. Who does end up filing the report? And what happens after that?
I filed the report on Monday, the 28th. I first called Franklin Police. They said, "Nope, you got to call the state police in Indianapolis." So I called them. They said, "No, you got to call Lafayette PD." I called them. Finally, they said, "Nope, you need to call state police in Lafayette." So I called them. They're the ones who finally took the police report. Hours later, I'm just like going, "What is going on here?"
Yeah.
But anyway, it seemed like everybody wanted to push pass the buck off to somebody else. But anyway, so I got a hold of the state police, and they allowed me to file a missing persons report over the phone. And then they waited for Valerie to file one, and she never did.
Okay.
To this day, to the day she died, she never filed a police report.
Okay, we have to say Valerie is deceased?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure I knew that. Okay. Now, is it at some point in all of this, when do you find out? Of course, he's not missing, but what we've forgotten about is, well, he does have this motorcycle. In what phase of all of this do you begin to find out that he's missing, but his motorcycle actually was still there on the side of the road? In what part of all of this do you find that out?
After I filed the police report, and I had reached out to a woman named Julie Wise with the Q Center.
Spoke to her.
And which is a missing persons outfit.
Yeah.
And she went down and interviewed the people, Dean Sloan and the guy Bill, and she spoke to the police down there and the tow truck driver, and so she was the one that actually gave me the information about his bike and who he had talked to and all of that. And then when I went up myself, I also went and talked to all these people. I even talked to the owners of the pig farm that he was at. And
I guess what I'm asking you, Kim, is when you started filing this police report, how quickly did the police determine, oh yeah, this is connected to that motorcycle we found on the side of the road abandoned a couple weeks ago? How long did it take? Did the police put that all together, or what?
With Julie Wise, they put it all together. I guess they had gone down there. After I filed the police report, then the state police from Lafayette went down there and started to investigate.
Okay. And what did you learn in the process of all this? What David is missing, but his motorcycle it was not missing. It was sitting there on the side of the road. What did you learn about what was done with the bike? Like the next day, of course, David goes missing on that particular day. When does the bike actually get taken away? What's done with it? What did you learn about that?
From what I was told, the motorcycle was towed to the towing company the next day.
Huh. Okay.
That I was told by the tow truck driver that he went back by there the next morning, and the bike was still sitting there. So he called the state police, and the state police had them take it to the towing company, and they held it there for about 9 months, I want to say.
Wow.
And they had it in impound, they said, police impound. So we weren't allowed to, go get it out or anything because it was part of an investigation. But yeah, I was told that, and I actually went there and saw the bike, and his saddlebags were on there. There was stuff in the saddlebags. There was a computer. There was a CO2 gun. Like a laptop, and some other items. I don't remember exactly everything that was in there, but there was quite a bit of stuff in there. And the police had his helmet. He had thrown his helmet into Dean Sloan's garbage can because he got ticked off.
Wow.
When he found out how much it would cost for him to get the bike towed back, he got mad and threw his helmet in the garbage.
But the thing is that you tried to get the bike back, but the cost was prohibitive because of the storage fee at the towing company?
Well, no, they said that they wouldn't release it.
Okay.
Because it was part of an ongoing investigation, because it was part of a missing persons case. They wouldn't release it. And I said, well, when you do, please let us know, because we would like to get it out. And but they didn't. They did not tell us when they released it, and they sold it at auction without ever letting us know about it.
Wow. All right, so 9 months, the bike just sat there.
Correct.
All right.
The police did not go there and take fingerprints off of it. Nothing. They did
That's
nothing
common.
with the bike.
Okay.
They just put it there and let it sit.
So everybody's important to remember. David goes missing, but the bike is still there on the side of the road. It does eventually get taken away, and eventually it does not go back into the hands of Valerie or Kim or anybody else in David's family. That eventually it gets sold.
Correct.
Somehow. All right. And maybe you want to come back to that in a bit. All right. So David's missing, but the motorcycle is found. Do you know, let's talk a little bit about, we want to get into some of these specifics in a bit, but as far as searches, what kind of searches were done in the area? You've talked about these various items, and I want to get into them later a bit. How many people were involved? Did they canvass that area? How would you explain this area around where the motorcycle was found? Of course, we're open to the idea that maybe it got picked up by somebody, but we don't theorize here regarding actual results. But, how many searches were done out there, maybe trying to find David?
Well, I don't believe anybody went and searched. I don't think that there were any organized searches for him out there. I went down, like I said, and I talked to people. And when the police went out there originally, it had snowed. And there was a field. This is a rural area.
Mm-hmm. Sure is.
Like farmland.
Yes.
Okay. And so everything was muck. They didn't want to walk through the fields. They just kind of went out on the outskirts and looked around, and when they didn't see anything, they walked away and got back in their cars.
Yep, that's common. Yes.
That was the extent of their search for my brother.
Yeah. All right. Now,
Julie Wise did go down there and look around, and she talked to people. She did what she could. But, because he was seen getting into a car that night,
Allegedly.
They do not.
Oh,
They no, it wasn't allegedly. I'm telling you, there were a
okay,
bunch of
we're gonna get
talk
into this
in the
comment,
car.
but your belief is the reason those searches were done is because there is a story out there that David did get into a car with someone.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So
Okay. So what you're saying is some testimony has kept that area from really being searched. The people nearby were talked to, and we're going to get into what they specifically saw and heard, and everything else. Their encounters with David, but as far as what we normally describe as a missing person search, a bunch of people going out there, arm to arm or whatever. They didn't do anything like that.
nothing.
Okay. All right. That's
No.
important for
And
everybody.
I felt from the very beginning that they did not give this case the attention that it needed to be solved.
Okay. Let's now go to the rest of the disappearance. There are a lot of things that we need to get into a lot more detail oriented. What we've really, to this point, listeners, we've really just gone over the generalities. We're going to get into more the technicalities, the technical aspects of some of this stuff now. Let's start here, though. Of course, you called Bill, and he was supposed to go out there and get him. You actually spoke to him, and we'll get into. But did he, to your knowledge, did he ever go out there? What did he have to say when you finally did talk to him about the message that you left? What did he say?
He said he didn't get any messages.
Zero. Did he even know that David was missing then?
Here's the thing. He knew he was missing.
Okay.
By the time I saw him,
Okay.
I went there the beginning of May. By the time I saw him, I went to his door, and when he found out who I was, he literally shook. Like his whole body was shaking, like he was so nervous. And I asked him about, I said, I'm David's sister. He called me that day. He asked me to call you. I called you 3 or 4 times. I left several messages. And why didn't you go get him? And he said, I didn't get any messages.
Is that right?
Yeah. And then he told me that he did not know David that well, that he did not know David's wife, that he did not know his kids, and that was all lies.
As we've already stated before, you said that his wife and Valerie knew each other well.
They were good friends. I was told they were best friends.
Okay.
And from everyone else that is in that circle, they all know that David and Biker Bill knew each other for years.
But when you show up there and look him in the eye, that's what Bill said.
Right.
All right. Did Bill ever convey?
In his boots. I don't know what he was so afraid of, because I'm just an old lady, looking for my brother.
Yeah.
And he acted like he was scared to death of me.
Do you have any idea, did he ever say, have you ever found out how he found out that David was missing? Did he find out from Valerie? Did he find out from Facebook? Did he find out, from the newspaper? I don't know.
If I'm correct, I believe he found out through Brian Phillips.
All right. A guy that we still have yet to talk about.
Or this other Bill Darnell.
Okay. All right. So that is his story. That is how he found out. One of those ways is how he found out. He did not find out from your messages because he says he never got those messages.
Right.
All right. So
I know I called and left a message. I know it was his phone because he said, this is Bill.
Okay.
Please leave a message. So I know I called the right number, and I know that he got those messages.
So when you spoke to David, so he gave you, I would not not suspect that you would have Bill's number, so David gave you that number.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so everybody remember that. Kim on the disappearance date calls Bill, who had worked on David's motorcycle, says, "Hey, David's broke down on the road. Can you go get him?" Bill is saying that he never received the multiple messages that Kim left with him. Let's now go to this. We talked about the Sloan guy who lives nearby, the witnesses by the interstate, multiple. What do they say about their encounters with David that day? What did they see David doing? I mean, there's even one story, I think, where David was like kind of hanging out like near a fence or something, and then when the guy pulled up, David ran off. What can you say about all these different witness stories? These people who live right next to I-65.
So David had crossed the highway, and there was a pig farm. And they found his wetsuit and his rain suit and 2 CO2 cartridges by a fence. David was sitting there by the fence, and one of the neighbors saw him because he had walked around a little bit there. It was just it looks like an abandoned pig farm. The house is all full of just stuff from floor to ceiling. If you look in the window, you just see nothing but crap everywhere.
Okay.
And so it's kind of an abandoned pig farm. So David was there, and one of the neighbors called the owners of the pig farm. They own a restaurant there in Franklin, and so they called them, and their son went over there to check it out and see what was going on. So the guy drives by and sees David, and so he turns around to come back, and when he did, David shot off through the field to get away from him. So that's when he left the rain suit and the CO2 cartridges sitting there.
Do you know what, any way to know what time of day this was? Of course, we have a call he made to you at 10:30. We have this other call that he made at 4. Have you ever been able to tell this particular sighting when that happened in relation to those calls?
If my memory serves me correctly, and you got to remember it's been 8 years.
It has been, yes.
But I believe it was somewhere, around 1 or 2 in the afternoon.
All right, so
I'm going to say closer to 2, between 2 and 3, according to what the people that owned that pig farm said.
All right, so kind of halfway between those calls.
Right.
Okay.
And I also went and talked to the people over there that lived on that road where that pig farm was. The ones that I could get to answer the door.
Yeah.
I went and talked to. But of course they all, oh no, I didn't see anything. Nope, didn't see anything. Nope, didn't see anything.
Okay.
It's like I'm not looking for a murderer. I'm looking for my brother.
Right. So we have this sighting. What about any other sightings? You said that he did go and use somebody's phone, right? That's not the same place. That's somewhere else.
Right. That was Dean Sloan. He was the guy that lived directly down the embankment from where David's bike broke down.
Okay.
Like you could walk from where David's bike broke down and was on the side of the road, straight down the embankment, right into Dean Sloan's yard.
And he says that David used his phone.
Yes.
Do we know who David called?
A couple of times. I have no idea.
And the guy doesn't know either?
No. Doesn't know.
Didn't hear the contents of the calls?
He said he was calling to try to get help.
All right. But he didn't say hi.
Brian Phillips said, I believe he said that he received a phone call from David that day. A message. He didn't answer the phone, but he got a message from him.
Okay.
Also saying that he was broken down and where he was at, what mile marker.
Okay. So maybe that's who. So David's calling you from his phone. Of course, we heard this story that the phone is maybe the battery's dying. Certainly easy to
Right.
believe. And so he goes maybe to the Sloan guy's place and calls Brian. Maybe.
Right.
Okay. What about any other encounters that any of those
I know he
locals?
was calling tow. I know he was called. He called a couple of tow companies also.
Okay. Okay. What about any other interactions that anybody had with Brian or David that day?
The only other one that I know of for sure was the guy that lived next to Dean Sloan. His name is Bill.
Okay.
Same thing. David went over, talked to him. He was the one that he asked if he would take him to Lafayette with his bike. And the guy said, "I can't. I've already had a drink. I don't feel comfortable driving."
Okay.
So, and then there was a rumor, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, but he was also rumored to, sometime during the day, he had walked down, there was a rest area south of where he broke down, and that he had walked down there, that rest area, that somebody seen him down there, so I'm not sure.
Okay. This Sloan guy who had the one-on-one interaction with David, did he say David seemed, out of his mind? Did he seem pretty clear-headed? Of course, he was probably ticked off and everything, but did this Sloan guy say that David
Well, I don't know. I know that the police and Josh both said that David seemed fine, that he was coherent. However, Dean did say that David was sweating quite a bit.
But everybody should know Josh is the tow truck driver. We're not going to use his last name, but we're going to come back to him in a bit. But he's not one of the
reason I said that about the poison.
Yeah, you don't have to.
The people that stayed with him that night said he sweat profusely during that episode that happened.
Okay, we're gonna get to the poisoning. We're gonna have a long talk about that. Let's move on to this. You've mentioned the helmet, the rain gear. You've mentioned these air canisters. These were all found in different locations. Why don't you just go through those once again? I know it's a little laborious to do so, but they were all found in different locations. It wasn't like they were all piled somewhere. The helmet's over here, the rain gear's over there. What can you say about this?
Okay,
again?
So the only items that they found was the helmet, which was in Dean Sloan's garbage can.
Wow.
The CO2 cartridges, two unspent CO2 cartridges, and his rain suit were found together on the pig farm. And I want to say there was something else that was found, but I can't remember what it was. Everything else was found on the bike. There were tools on the bike when they hauled it away. The keys were in the bike when they hauled it away.
Okay.
Other than that, I don't remember.
Okay.
I wish I could remember because I know that there was something else that was found somewhere else.
Let me just ask you this: these air canisters or these cartridges, these are for a BB gun.
Right, for a pellet gun.
For a pellet gun, and was the pellet gun found on the bike? Do you know?
The bike.
It was.
Yes, on the bike.
All right. So if everybody's you've mentioned it a few times. These air cartridges. What is she talking about? He had a pellet gun, I guess maybe for self-defense, in contrast to like a gun that shoots bullets, like a Glock or something. This is a pellet gun, and he had these air cartridges, and the air cartridges were found, at least some of them, somewhere else, but the gun was found on the bike.
Correct.
Okay.
The only thing that was not with the bike that I know David had on him was his phone, his wallet, and his pill safe.
His pill, like the pain pills and all of that.
Right. It was. Okay. He had this safe thing that you were able to lock. That you wore like a fanny pack. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what he kept his medication in, because his wife would steal it from him. He had to lock it up to keep her from stealing it. And I know he picked up his prescription that morning.
Okay. So that is missing as well. Okay, thank you for that.
Correct.
All right, so these are these items. So the bike's there sitting on the side of the road, but some of the items that you would usually find with a motorcycle are found elsewhere. The helmet and the rain gear, and they're in separate locations, not near each other, in the general vicinity of the motorcycle, but on different properties. Okay. Right. Speaking of his phone, it's missing, but do we know what the records say? Do we know what the pings say about his phone?
It was a burner phone, like
okay. Pay as you go phone.
Yep.
Okay.
And so I don't know what the police have been able to find or not been able to find with the phone, because they won't release that information to me.
Okay. So you don't know, for example, if the phone ever pinged out of the immediate area of the motorcycle that day?
I know that it did not ping. After they told me that the last call that came in on that phone, or that went out on that phone, was to me.
Okay. That's what they told you. But we don't know about any ping information. Of course, we all know we're being followed all the time with our phones bouncing off different towers. You don't know, for example, if the phone ever pinged off a tower like 50 miles away.
Nothing, no, but I'm sure it probably did, because he rode from.
I guess later that night or something.
No,
Afterwards.
It did not.
Okay.
Which they said it wouldn't ping if the battery was dead.
It wouldn't. That's certainly true. And if the battery died, that would certainly get in the way of that. And David himself said that his phone was in the process of dying, maybe down to like 10%, 8% on his phone. Okay.
Right.
I have to ask you, just going back to the items, anything else that you think that he should have had with him, being that he was going to Florida, that you think are, of course, we know that his phone's missing, ID's missing, pill. Anything that was not found there that you think they should have found there?
Oh, another thing that they found with it was also his leather jacket was found with the bike.
Okay.
But I think that David owned a knife.
Okay.
Like a hunting type knife.
Right.
So I believe that there should have been a knife there. Whether they found one or not, I don't know, because they haven't released to me the information on what exactly all they found.
Okay.
I went there. They wouldn't let me touch the bike.
No, of course not.
They wouldn't let me touch the saddlebags to look and see what was in it. The items that I know were in the saddlebag were sticking out where I could see them.
Okay. Now we're finally going to get to the poison story that you've met. You said the word poison many times. I don't know how many times we've talked about poison or poisoning on Unfound. But when did this topic first pop up for David's disappearance? Do you remember?
That morning.
Okay, and please detail that again if you could.
Okay, so what happened is when David called me, he told me that Valerie had poisoned him with rat poison. And that she had put it either in the chili or his root beer.
Okay.
He was deathly sick that night. He told me about it on the 15th, but it actually took place on the 14th.
Okay.
Him and her had gotten into it. She left. He ate the chili and the root beer and started barfing gray stuff. And continued to throw up throughout the night. And he was so bad, according to the neighbor upstairs, who he ended up spending the night with up in their apartment, said that he literally looked gray himself. and that everything that came out of him was gray. And it was so much that it filled one of those big coolers that they use at the football games.
Yeah.
Throw ice on the coach. He literally filled one of those. They said
throwing up.
Pouring sweat. Yes.
Okay.
They said he was pouring sweat like his body was crying, his whole body.
Okay.
They said they had never seen anything like it. They tried to get him to go to the hospital. He didn't want to go to the hospital because he didn't want them to admit him, and that was the only reason that he gave them, that he did not want to go to the hospital, because he was afraid they would keep him. He didn't want to be admitted to the hospital.
Okay. And so he was up at his neighbor's the night before then.
Right. The neighbor went downstairs to see, they were friends, and they'd hang out together. So he went downstairs to see what was going on with David, and he said when he got down there and David came to the door, David was so sick, he just kept throwing up. And he said he literally had to climb up the steps on his hands and knees. And Luke said he was afraid that David was going to die. He was that bad.
Wow.
He said he stayed up all night watching it to make sure he was breathing.
Okay. And then the next morning, David did tell you that he thought he had been poisoned.
Yes.
Okay.
And here's another thing. The week before, Valerie had borrowed rat poison from the people upstairs.
That's what the neighbors told you.
Yes.
Okay.
Her name is Jonte and his name is Luke. And they both told me that, I have this in a recording where they were telling me what had happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so this is where the poison story comes from. That they're not getting along. Of course, we've detailed they're already having marriage problems. And there are stories out there of spouses poisoning their significant others, and those spouses dying. Goes both ways, both men poisoning women, women poisoning men. In fact, I think that happened. There was a female author who poisoned her husband and killed him within maybe the last 5 years. I remember reading that story. So not totally crazy. And the neighbors and David might have been absolutely 100% correct regarding this. And I guess we also have to keep in mind then that when David got on his bike that morning, then probably still feeling the effects of this.
Right. Okay. And that takes me back to what Dean Sloan said about him sweating real bad, because that was something that Luke and Jonte had both told me that he had been doing all night long.
Yeah. All right, so those two stories seem to go together.
Right.
All right, they're congruent. And we have to remember this is March, so the odds of sweating in Indiana in March, not very likely.
Correct.
All right, okay. So let's now move on. So that is the poison story, and so once again, I leave it up to the listeners how they interpret all of that. Let's move on to this. We have to remember the second call. He talked about being set up. He talked about maybe killing himself. Of course, a lot of people have joked around about killing themselves, and they don't do it. So we have to. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what he did. And in fact, if he did do that, I'm not sure how he did it, given he didn't seem to have anything. Maybe an overdose of some type, but I don't know.
I believe that if he killed himself, he'd have been found.
Okay. That's certainly a reasonable belief. Now, we have to keep in mind, though, in that second call, he never does mention Bill, does he?
Nope.
No, he doesn't. For example, he doesn't ask you, hey, Kim, did you ever reach Bill? He doesn't say that in the second.
Not.
He did not. Okay. But that leads us to this. Of course, we said, oh my God, there's a truck pulling up. It seems ominous, but I guess it's not. Maybe it is. These Good Samaritans, what can you say about them? The police tracked them down? What's this story?
I believe that once the story came out, they had seen it, I'm not sure where in Kentucky they live. Maybe they live down by Louisville. I know that we had at least a couple of billboards talking, showing that David was missing. I don't know how often these people drove through that area. I'm not sure exactly how they connected. It may have been, they may have called the police too. I don't know. I think Julie has more of that information about that than I do.
Okay.
So, because I'm pretty sure she was the one who told me about them.
Okay. And do you know what these Samaritans had to say? They pull over, they see David on the side of the road. He's by his bike, looks like a person in distress. They don't know anything about. They don't know him. They don't know that he's leaving his wife. They don't know anything about him. He's just a guy on the side of the road. What do you know? What they had to say about their interaction with him?
I don't remember. I don't recall exactly what they had to say about it. I do know. Let me take that back.
Okay.
I was told that they had stopped and asked David if he needed help, and he said, "I have help on the way."
Okay. All right. So that's that he said he had help on the way. Of course, Bill says he never got your messages.
Right.
So I'm wondering then what David meant by that. Could he have meant Valerie? He could have meant Brian. He could have meant.
I think he thought that I had gotten a hold of Bill and that he would be coming to him.
Okay, that's reasonable.
David knew that and looking back at it now, it just seems so silly to me that I didn't take it more seriously after what he had told me when he was at my sister's. But who thinks that something like this is going to happen?
Nobody.
Right. You don't think that,
does.
hey, my brother's going to get on a motorcycle to come to my house and he's going to disappear and never be seen again.
I mean, it happens. I guess I
can't believe that I wasn't more concerned about him being broke down, or I could have called my sister and said, hey, he's broke down. Can you go get him and his bike, and can you, put him on a plane down here, and when we come up later, we'll get the bike and all this stuff. Hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
And I'm telling you, I beat myself up all the time because I didn't put more weight to the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very common. It's easy. Hindsight 20/20. Very easy to do that. Most of my guests feel the exact same way. In retrospect, I should have done this. I should have done that.
I should have noticed this or noticed that.
Yeah. Let's move on to this, and this is noteworthy. This is a big deal, and I want the listeners to know that we're doing this interview on July 26th, 2024. It's going to be coming out on August 2nd, so we still have another week. But both Kim and I, at this point, are trying to resolve something. And yes, we're still trying to resolve something 8.5 years into this disappearance. And it has to do with a story that was told on that day, and then a different story that was told more recently. Kim, what would you like to say about what you were told about the sighting of David later in the day, and then seemingly how that story has changed?
Okay, so between 10 and 11 o'clock at night, there was a sighting of my brother on the side of the road with his bike, and a car that had pulled up, a maroon Grand Am that had pulled up, and my brother was talking to a woman. They could tell that it was a woman, and he was talking to a woman through the passenger side window, and then he was seen getting into the car with her and them driving off together. And this situation that happened was seen not only by the truck driver or the tow truck driver that was out there earlier in the day, but also by a couple that he was there helping on the side of the road that night. He has since changed his story, but he gave that statement to the state police, and so did the couple that were there that night on the road. And they all told the police the same thing. And it just happens that my brother and his wife own a maroon Grand Am with front end damage. And that was the car that was described by the tow truck driver and this couple, and none of them would have had any knowledge that
was her car. Okay. Right. So first of all, we need to. So David was out there on the side of the road for 12 hours. So this is, once again, this is not 10 in the morning. This is 10 at night, and he called you at 10:30 in the morning. So 12 hours later, he's still out there on the highway.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And so this sighting is of a car right by the motorcycle, and David is talking to the driver.
Correct.
All right. And does this witness see David get into that car and drive away, or when this witness...
Yes.
That's what the witness saw.
They saw him get into the passenger's side and drive off in the car.
Okay.
Right off into the car.
All right. So how is this what the police told you, or did the witness himself tell you this?
What the tow truck driver and the couple that he was there helping that night, they were only about 100 feet ahead of my brother. There was a car that broke down, and the tow truck driver that was out there earlier in the day came out there again that night and was helping that couple. And they were the ones, the three witnesses, that saw my brother get into the car. There was also a sighting by Dean Sloan of the car being there, and also by Bill. But everybody's changed their stories now for some reason.
All right, so let's get into that. So that was the original story.
Yes.
But now more recently, the story has changed. What has the story changed to?
I have no idea.
Mm-hmm. I will tell listeners that I've spoken to at least one of... I'll just speak for myself. I've spoken to one of these witnesses, and this witness now says that, nope, when I went by David on his motorcycle later that day, there was nobody there. That was the last time I saw him. He was just leaning up against his motorcycle. There was no car there. This is in direct this is directly different than what this person said back then. I'll just leave it at that. And you have been trying to reach this person since I talked to this person, and you've not been able to reach him, have you?
Correct.
Even though he had been talking to you up until this point.
Well, I haven't spoken to him in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But, he gave that statement to the police.
Yeah.
He contacted me. He reached out to me on Facebook.
Yeah.
And since then, he's changed his Facebook page as well. So all that stuff that was in there for his old account is no longer in my messages where he had sent that to me.
Okay.
And I'm just really frustrated because this is not a joke. This is my brother.
Right.
And how do you change your story 8 years later?
Yep. I agree. I can't resolve it. And like I said, I'm going to try to do my best between the end of this interview and putting the episode together next week to try to resolve this. I can't make any guarantee at this point. Of course, in the summation after this interview, you'll know whether Kim and I were able to resolve any of this before this episode comes out. Hopefully we will. All right, let's move on to this. Of course, going along with that, I guess, kind of, is a story. I have to talk about it. I'm not. I just, I leave these things up to the audience. There's a story that a friend of David's told, and I really don't want to get into any names regarding this, Kim, so please leave the names out of it. But this guy pulled up to a house and saw something wrapped in a tarp. If you could tell the story without using any names, please do so.
Okay. So it was at my brother's house.
Okay.
And he had gone there to look for my brother because he was told that he had gone camping and he would be back in a couple of days.
Okay.
So he comes up to the house and he knocks on the door, but nobody answers. So he hears somebody though in the garage.
Mm-hmm.
Now the garage has a side door and then it has the big door that opens up. The garage is no longer there now today, but at that time it was there. And so he goes over and he hears them talking inside. There's two people inside. And he walks in and he sees something on the ground wrapped up in a tarp with ratchet straps around it.
Huh.
And there was also a refrigerator in there that had been ratchet strapped closed. And it's hanging open. And he looks at the other two people and he says, I hope what I think is in that tarp is not what's in that tarp.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the people says to him, well, of course that's what's in the tarp. What else would it be?
And Brian thought that there was a body in this tarp?
Yes.
Okay. But he didn't actually see a body?
He did not. They did not open the tarp.
Okay.
But he helped put it in the trunk.
Okay.
And he could tell that it was a body.
Okay. And did he know, in fact, this story that Brian told actually led to a house or a piece of ground, a floor being searched. Where was this?
That was out in Lafayette, in West Lafayette.
Okay.
Not very far from the police station, out on Cough Lane, and it was the home of the two of the drug dealers that were friends with David and were supplying his wife with her drugs.
Okay. There was, once again, the reason, and Kim, I should jump in here. The reason the listeners know, usually when this kind of stories, we get stories like this, I shy away from them for official interviews. But being that the story did end up leading to a search by police, we have to talk about it. We have to talk about,
right,
because the police did go up there. They did know about this story. They took it seriously. They actually went and did a search.
Yes, they and this was also the house that David ran into Valerie at the morning that he left.
Okay.
Okay, so it's no longer owned by those people. There's a new owner, but they went in and they dug up the floor in the garage. Because the story was that they dug up the floor, which was mostly just gravel, and, they would throw down concrete if they had worked on something, and they would just throw it in the garage on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a real concrete floor. So they dug all that up, and they put him in the ground, and then they covered him back up, and then they poured not a thick layer, like not a slab, but some concrete over top of it.
Okay.
So when the police went back out there and dug up the floor, they did not find anything.
Nothing.
So Brian believes that he was moved later and that they did that because they were worried that Brian would tell someone.
Mm-hmm. I have to ask, sometimes this can be told, could police even tell if something had even been buried there in the past? Like within the last few years or last week or last month or anything?
Well, they said there was a lot of roots in there, so they
Mm-hmm.
said they didn't think that, he was buried there. But I mean, Brian is just adamant.
Okay.
He was in tears while he was telling the story. I have no reason not to believe him.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I have reason to question police
Okay.
because of the way they've handled the case from the start.
Mm-hmm. Something else that has popped up was a particular sheet. When I say a sheet, like a cover for a bed, a thin sheet, covering for a bed. What significance does this hold in David's disappearance? How did you find out about this? Who came across this?
Okay, so the police went once they were told that a car matching my sister-in-law's car was out there that night, and that David had gotten into it. The police went to Valerie and David's house, and they searched her car. Inside the car, they found the sheet in the trunk with David's blood on it.
How much blood have you seen?
It wasn't a lot of blood, but enough.
Okay.
And
let me move on to this. Did Valerie ever offer up a theory as to what happened to David? Of course, as we've already covered, she's deceased now. But when he goes missing, she thinks he's going camping or whatever. Did she ever offer up a theory?
Nope. She said once she found out that he was coming to my house, that was when she finally showed her true colors and said, "Well, he was leaving me. He don't need me. I don't need to deal with his problems." Mm-hmm. I mean, she literally said to me, because we were supposed to meet with the news at the state police post there in West Lafayette. She and I both were supposed to meet with them. And when I called her and said, you're gonna come with me to the police post, right, and meet with the news station, she sent me a message later saying, David doesn't need me anymore. It's time for me to move on with my life. Now, this was the end of April.
Okay.
Her husband's been missing a total of about 6 weeks. And she sends me this text telling me that he doesn't need her anymore and it's time for her to move on with her life. She tried to tell me, he lied to you and he went off and started a new life. David had never been out of Indiana in his life.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He did not just go off and start a new life, and he wouldn't have left his mother that way. The only reason David was willing to come to Florida was because I promised him that I would make sure he saw his mother again.
And Valerie didn't. You told me that she started giving away all of David's stuff and clothes and everything else. Selling it.
Selling anything she could that was his. And here's the thing: she said that she thought he had gone camping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that he had gone camping. Here's the thing: his camping gear was all there at the house. She was selling it. And I know this because of the neighbors telling me this. Rick Scripter, which was a friend of David's, lived across the street from him. They used to ride their motorcycles together from time to time. He told me that when Valerie started, she was having a big yard sale. Everything. She's selling everything. Washers, dryers, refrigerators, stoves. They had some appliances in the garage that were theirs. The appliances that were in the apartment that they lived in belonged to the owner of the house. It was like a duplex.
Yeah.
The bottom floor was one duplex, and one part of it, and then the upper floor was, the upstairs was another. So they had their own appliances that were in the garage. And so she was trying to get money, obviously probably to support her drug habit, since David wasn't around to give her money anymore.
Okay.
So she's trying to sell everything. And Rick said he went over there just to see what she was selling. And he said that there was a refrigerator in there that was ratchet strapped closed, and that he asked her about buying that fridge because he figured he could make it into a kegerator for his son. And she jumped, he said, about 10 feet between him and that fridge and threw her arms up in the air and said, no, that's not for sale. We need to get out of here. We shouldn't even be in here. And made him leave the garage and shut the door. And that's the same refrigerator that Brian was talking about.
Okay.
And we tried to get the police out there for 3 days. He called them. I called them. It took them 3 days to go out there. And once they went out there, the refrigerator was gone. It was gone. So if the story that Brian told is in fact true, then that happened the week after David went missing, and that was the reason the fridge disappeared, and that's the reason she didn't want him going near it, because he told me that refrigerator was open and David was on a body was on the floor.
Just to explain something, how does that story sync up with the story that Brian told? How would those two stories go together?
The reason that they would go together is because it's the same fridge.
Okay. Same location, same location. And I mean, I guess from a timing point of view, when did Brian say he saw something wrapped in a tarp, and when did this sale happen?
It was like the Thursday after, not 2 days after he went missing, but a whole week later, like 9 days later.
Okay.
And she was selling stuff when I reported him missing, which was on the 28th. So Rick got a hold of me either the 28th or 29th. I went on Facebook and posted about him being missing. And that's when Rick Scripter got a hold of me.
Okay.
That's when Josh Kreiser got a hold of me.
I'm just wondering if we were to believe Brian if we're to believe this. Once again, I don't. The only reason we're talking about it is because the police obviously took this seriously enough to go out there and do some digging around.
Right.
But it seems contradictory to me that something would have been in the freezer, but then also have been buried somewhere else.
No, no, it's not, because what he said was that when he went there and the body's laying on the floor in the tarp, that refrigerator, the ratchet straps are off and it's open.
Okay.
And they had taken the body, in other words, out of the refrigerator, and they were getting ready to put it in the trunk and take it to the property out there on Cough Lane.
Okay. So the way then we think about this is Rick shows up and is not allowed near that freezer, and then at some point after that is when Brian encounters them with the tarp.
Right, and then here, listen to this. So eventually that refrigerator wound up out there on Cough Lane in that garage.
Okay, where the drug dealers live. Okay. All right. I'll leave the listeners to decide that for themselves. The possibility, once again, we're going into theories, but if the police are going to take it seriously, we have to talk about it. And given that we have this sighting, that at least the story that was originally told, it's that David encountered somebody out there on the highway, and did he get driven the whole way back to Lafayette, and something happened there. So, but once again, going back, Valerie never offered up her own theory. Like, well, he ran off, he committed suicide, he got picked up by a serial killer. She never said anything about this.
The one thing that she did try to say was that he had some kind of a psychosis.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
From his pain medication. I don't think so.
Okay. And you already said she is deceased. When did she die, and how did she pass away?
She died in November of 2022.
All right. So
of organ failure.
Okay.
And I could be wrong, but I believe I was told that it was her liver.
Probably from her addictions.
Yes.
The liver takes a hand.
She OD'd like 3 times, and one time at least I know that they said that they didn't think she was going to make it. In fact, they got a hold of me, and Detective Kendall got a hold of me and tried to get me to sign the paperwork to take her off of life support.
Okay.
And I actually reached out to her son from her first marriage and had him get a hold of them, and he dealt with all that.
Okay.
So I didn't have to deal with it, but yeah, they tried. The police, Detective Kendall got a hold of me and tried to get me to, or told me that somebody from the family needed to, sign the paperwork for her to be taken off of life support. And it's like, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Okay. Let's move on to this. How tough have the last 8.5 years been, Kim?
It's been horrible. It's been absolutely horrible. He's had 2 grandchildren born since he disappeared. His daughter, Ashley, has been in and out of jail with her own drug issues because she can't cope with life. His daughter, Bailey, I've spoken to her one time, and she just refuses to believe that, her mother was involved at all.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric just, he's just doing the best that he can. For me, it's horrible because out of my brother's 47 years, I saw him for the first 3 or 4 years of his life, and then I saw him for 3 days, and then he was gone. And I've been told everything from he was put into a vat of acid and liquefied to he was put in a chipper, like a tree chipper.
Yep.
He was put in. He was taken out to Packers there in Indiana, in Lafayette, and thrown in with the pigs, and ground up, and people are eating him, and he was put into a crematorium, a pet crematorium, and just horrific stories. I've heard it all about what happened to him, that they shot him in the back of the head, they slit his throat, just...
Yeah.
It's been hell.
Yeah.
And I know, it's been 8 years. I know and after the first, I would say, couple of weeks, I knew he wasn't coming home, not alive. I really don't think he's alive. There's nothing I would love more than for him to be alive. And I'll tell you this, that we did a podcast not very long ago, and my husband's cousin actually called me and said, I think I saw your brother. I'm like, what? And she lives in Wisconsin. And she says, I could have swore it was him. And I was just like, there's no way. First of all, David loved his mother to pieces. And when she died, if David was alive and knew that she died, nothing would have kept him from coming, from being there.
Yeah.
There's no way. It's been horrible.
Yeah. And the thing is, you have to do this all from Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every chance that I get, when I go to Indiana, I go to the police and try to find out, do you know anything else, anything new? I just was there in June, and I went up and talked to them, and we went over everything that they could tell me. I believe they could tell me a lot more than they are. They're just choosing not to. They tell me I have to file a FOIA, and good luck getting it done, is what they told me. Good luck getting the information.
Yep.
Indiana's one of the worst states there is for this nonsense. Families should be told whatever they know, because then we wouldn't, go off on all these theories. They would just be straight with us.
Kim, do you have a Facebook page, website, anything like that set up for David's disappearance? If so, tell the listeners about it right now.
It is on Facebook, and the name of it is My Brother David Kallenberger is Missing. Mm-hmm. It's a public website or page, and if you have tips or anything like that, or you'd like to find out more about it, you can go on there. I have several posts on there about it, and also I've done a few podcasts about it. Some of them, were more detailed than others, but there's a lot of information. His pictures posted. If you know anything, and I believe that my page is also posted, or is also a public page, so that anyone who, if you can't go through his website, then you can look me up, Kimberly J. Hansen. Hansen with a O.
Okay. Kim, any final words before we complete this interview?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you. I appreciate you trying to help me with it.
You're very welcome.
And that was my July 26th, 2024 interview with Kim, the sister of David Kallenberger. I thank her for joining me and all of you on this episode. Understanding the location of David, his motorcycle, and the numerous witnesses is very important in putting together the entire picture of this disappearance. So please go to Unfound's YouTube channel and watch the map analysis video. I did end up hearing back from the detective. However, he could not find anything in his files regarding the discrepancy from one of the witnesses' accounts. However, there is now a screenshot on Unfound's website that shows that the sighting of a person in a red car talking to David was part of the story back in 2016. And David's wife, Valerie, did drive a red car. So then, let's get right to my summation. For David's case, we have elements right out of a 1940s film noir. The victim allegedly being followed, alleged poison, alleged body in a tarp, shifting stories, a pig farm, a garbled recording, a felonious femme fatale. Am I forgetting anything? How do we sort this all out? Should we trust all of it? Some of it? None of it? Allow me to offer some quick insight on each. Then you can do the rest of the deliberating. David being followed.
We've heard about this a fair amount over the past almost 8 years. My thinking is, if the missing person never gave family and friends even one name, and a license plate number was never recorded, overwhelmingly, I think the stats say that this shows a paranoia of some type. However, people do get stalked, and missing people have been known to be followed before disappearing. The poison. Since David was leaving Valerie, I can understand her wanting to harm him. However, we have no tests. David didn't go to a hospital, and the symptoms he showed could be from a variety of causes, including everyday food poisoning or cancer of the digestive tract. But do spouses poison their significant others? Absolutely. The body in the tarp, allegedly. The public is slow to doubt anyone who is broken up about a disappearance, and Brian certainly was. However, trauma, the pain of loss, causes people to think they need to lie in order for investigators to be interested. Common. Likewise, what are we supposed to think of a friend who willingly, without coercion, helped others take that friend to be buried somewhere? Brian will not like me calling him a liar, but me calling him a liar is better than him being an accessory after the fact. The shifting stories. This is once again something we've encountered before. People who seemingly have no reason to change stories, then change stories. Generally, I think these people have nothing to do with the disappearances, but for David's, I can understand why you might think differently. The pig farm, 100% of the time it is best to stay away from these stories. The garbled recording. It's David. It's David's voice. He does not sound under duress to me. In fact, he just sounds ticked off. And even the kill himself comment sounds like something I might say out on the disc golf course. Yet, the belief he had that somebody had set him up is a much bigger deal, and you will have to analyze that for yourself. As for the femme fatale Valerie, I can understand why, if she found David was leaving her, that she would have had thoughts of killing him. Certainly. The question is, if we're to believe the witness, would David have really willingly gotten into a car with her? After refusing help from the police, the tow truck driver, the people who lived along the highway, and the Good Samaritan. It seems unlikely, but maybe David had gotten desperate at that point. And that's all I have to say. So, to believe or not to believe. If you'd like to hear and read more of my in-depth analysis into the disappearance of David Kallenberger, please go to patreon.com/unfound podcast, sign up, and partake in the Unfound blog. Until then, I leave the public theorizing up to you. And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.